Everyone thought she was gone forever. The billionaire's daughter lay in a golden casket, mourned by thousands. But just as the final prayers echoed through the hall, a ragged homeless black man pushed through the crowd, shouting words that froze every heart, "She's not dead." What happened next shattered the arrogance of wealth, exposed the blindness of privilege, and proved that sometimes the lowest in society see what the richest cannot. The day was heavy with mourning, though the sun was shining outside the massive cathedral draped in white lilies and golden banners. Inside, every seat was filled with the most powerful names in the country, politicians, celebrities, business tycoons, and even foreign dignitaries. They had all come to say goodbye to Evelyn Harrington, the only daughter of oil billionaire Charles Harrington. She had been the apple of his eye, known for her gentle charm and quiet elegance. But at just 27, her sudden collapse in her penthouse, declared as cardiac arrest, had sent shockwaves through the nation. The newspapers screamed headlines about tragedy and frailty hidden behind riches. The cathedral echoed with hushed sobs as the choir sang solemn hymns, their voices wrapping the hall in sorrow. Charles Harrington sat in the front row, his face carved with grief yet still carrying the proud posture of a man used to commanding rooms. His wife, too frail to attend, was mourning at home. Evelyn's golden casket sat raised on a platform, surrounded by roses, candles, and photographs of her smiling at charity galas, vacations in Europe, and formal events. Her body had not been shown. Her father insisted on a closed casket, saying he couldn't bear the sight of her lifeless face. Priests spoke of life, death, and eternity. Friends whispered memories. The cameras flashed, though respectfully muted, broadcasting the final farewell to millions watching live. For everyone in that hall, it was a day of unquestionable truth. Evelyn was gone, and this was the end of her story. But among the sea of black suits and designer dresses, on the very edge near the heavy cathedral doors, stood a man who didn't belong. His clothes were torn, his shoes split, his hair matted, and his dark skin sun-worn. People wrinkled their noses when he passed. The ushers tried to move him, but he stood firm, his eyes locked not on the priest, not on the billionaire, but on the casket. His name was Elijah, a homeless black man who spent most nights sleeping under bridges or in shelters if he was lucky. But today, he wasn't there to beg, nor to find warmth. His gaze was steady, his breath uneven, as if he carried a secret no one else dared imagine. And when the priest raised his hand for the final blessing, Elijah's rough voice cut through the silence, "She's not dead." The words fell like stones. Heads turned, gasps rippled through the pews. The ushers immediately moved toward him, but Elijah raised both hands and repeated, louder, shaking with urgency, "She's not dead." Charles Harrington's face turned red with fury. "Remove him at once," he barked, his grief burning into anger. But Elijah did not move. His eyes were wild, almost glowing, and he shouted, "I've seen death. I've buried friends on the street. I know what death looks like, and that woman in that box, she's not gone. She's breathing. You're burying her alive." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some whispered that the man was insane, others laughed nervously, but a few froze in shock at the sheer conviction in his tone. The ushers grabbed his arms, but Elijah thrashed like a lion, screaming, "Check her. Open the casket. Before you bury her, check her." Elijah was dragged down the marble aisle, his cries echoing even as people shouted at him to be quiet. Charles Harrington stood, his face twisted. With humiliation. "How dare this vagabond desecrate my daughter's funeral?" he thundered. But not everyone dismissed Elijah so quickly. An elderly nun sitting in the back had risen slowly, her voice trembling as she said, "Wait. Perhaps we should check." Her words, though soft, carried a strange weight that silenced some of the murmurs. The priest looked uneasy. The doctors who had signed Evelyn's death certificate shook their heads, muttering that this was nonsense. Yet Elijah kept shouting, tears streaming down his dirty face, "You'll regret it if you don't. She's alive in there. I swear on my own life she is." Security pushed him outside, tossing him onto the cathedral steps. His knees scraped against the stone, but he kept pounding on the door, yelling that they were making a mistake. Inside, Charles tried to resume the ceremony, but unease lingered. The nun's words had planted a seed of doubt. Finally, a young journalist covering the funeral stood up. "Mr. Harrington," she said boldly, "it would take only 1 minute to prove him wrong. Why not open the casket? If it silences this madness once and for all, the world will see it too." Cameras shifted, microphones lifted, and suddenly Charles was trapped between his pride and the eyes of the world. After a long silence, his voice broke out like iron. Fine. Open it. The casket creaked as it was unlocked, the sound louder than thunder in the hushed cathedral. Everyone leaned forward, hearts racing with dread and disbelief. Slowly, the lid was lifted. Gasps and screams filled the air. There she was, Evelyn, her skin pale but not lifeless, her chest rising ever so faintly, like the flutter of a trapped bird. A faint moan escaped her lips. The doctors froze, their eyes wide. One dropped his stethoscope. My God, she's alive. Chaos broke loose. Paramedics rushed forward. Charles stumbled backward, his knees giving out as he whispered his daughter's name over and over. The cathedral that had been drenched in grief now shook with a storm of disbelief. Elijah pushed his way back inside, collapsing to his knees as tears streamed down his face. I told you, he sobbed. I told you she wasn't dead. Evelyn's eyelids flickered, her lips trembling as though she was fighting through layers of darkness. And in that moment, the line between billionaire and beggar blurred, as the man dismissed as trash became the one who saved the richest girl in the city from being buried alive. The hospital room was filled with machines, beeping steadily as Evelyn lay recovering. Doctors explained that she had suffered from a rare medical condition, catalepsy, a state where her body mimicked death so closely that even trained physicians mistook her stillness for the end of life. She would have been sealed in the ground if not for Elijah's desperate interruption. Charles Harrington never left her side, shaken to the core that his pride had almost cost him his daughter. Reporters swarmed the story, the headlines exploding across the world. Homeless man saves billionaire's daughter from premature burial. Social media hailed Elijah as a hero, though some still mocked him, calling it luck or madness. When Evelyn finally opened her eyes fully, the first words she whispered were not to her father, but to Elijah. You saved me. Her voice cracked with gratitude, her pale hand reaching out to him. Elijah, sitting quietly in the corner in borrowed clothes, bowed his head, unable to stop the tears. I just couldn't let them bury you alive. God wouldn't let me stay silent. Charles watched the exchange, his world unraveling. All his wealth, his influence, his armies of doctors had failed. The one person who had saved his only child was a man he would have never let near his mansion. Pride cracked, under the weight of truth. He approached Elijah, his voice trembling, I owe you more than I can ever repay. But Elijah shook his head. I don't need your money. I just need, for people like me to be seen as human. His words cut deeper than any demand could. For the first time in decades, Charles Harrington's heart softened toward a man he would once have walked past without a glance. And as Evelyn's strength returned, she too made a vow. When I walk out of this hospital, Elijah, I will make sure your life changes. You saved mine, it's time I save yours. Weeks passed, and Evelyn's miraculous survival became the talk of the world. Her recovery was steady, and with it came a transformation in her family. Charles Harrington publicly acknowledged Elijah, praising him as the man who gave him back his daughter. He even invited Elijah to his home, though Elijah was uncomfortable walking into a mansion with crystal chandeliers and gold ceilings. But Evelyn made sure he knew he belonged. She sat beside him, listened to his stories of life on the streets, and cried at the suffering he had endured. She realized that while she had almost been buried alive once, Elijah had been buried alive by society every single day, ignored, invisible, treated as if dead while still breathing. Moved beyond words, Evelyn used her influence and wealth to start a foundation in Elijah's name, dedicated to helping the homeless receive medical care, shelter, and dignity. Elijah himself was given a home, clean clothes, and the chance to rebuild his life. He struggled at first, haunted by years of neglect, but with Evelyn's support, he began to heal. The bond between them grew, not of romance, but of a shared rebirth, two souls pulled back from the edge of death, one literal, the other spiritual. At a grand event months later, Evelyn stood on stage, her voice strong. I should not be here today, she told the audience of leaders and cameras. But because one man refused to stay silent, I was given a second chance. Elijah saw what no one else did, not even the doctors, not even my father. He saw life where everyone else saw death. And that is why from this day forward, his name will stand for hope. Elijah, sitting humbly in the front row in a clean suit, wept openly as the crowd gave him a standing ovation. For once, he was not invisible. He was the reason the billionaire's daughter still breathed. And as Charles Harrington looked at the homeless man who had saved his legacy, he whispered to himself a truth that had reshaped his entire empire. Sometimes the richest eyes are blind, and only the poor can truly see. This story isn't just about wealth, death, or survival, it's about listening to voices we ignore. Sometimes the person we dismiss as nothing carries the truth that saves lives. Don't walk past people like Elijah. See them, hear them, because kindness and attention can mean the difference between life and death.